And this is Ken Kraetzer for CVSI Services, coming to you from my home office in White Plains, New York, with another edition of CVSI Talking Business. We're reaching out to a lot of our marketing partners and friends during the COVID crisis, and ways to help local and national businesses. And we're very glad to have a chance to talk with Steve Dubin, who is the president of Plymouth, Massachusetts-based PRWorks. Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Kevin. Ken, thank you for having me on the show.
Our pleasure. Good. You know, we've had a couple of talks before. You've got a great career coming out of journalism, and now you advise a lot of companies on public relations and advertising right there just south of Boston. And you had a terrific article on your website today for PRWorks, and it's entitled, "Now is not the time to go silent. Reach out to customers and keep them informed during COVID-19." Now, you said it all there. Now, tell us a little bit about your thoughts that are in that article.
Well, so we've been approached by a number of clients who are sort of at their wits' end of, what is my messaging? How often do I message? How much detail do I give? What channels do I use to get that message out? How do we keep all stakeholders informed, from our customers, who are our life's blood, to our staff, who are our engine, and to all the other stakeholders involved, including the supply chain. So most people are concerned about trying to create as much revenue, volume, and service as possible during the crisis, but they also want to be able to come out on the other side of this by hitting the ground running, so that they've communicated well enough so that they've had minimal attrition of client base and revenue.
Absolutely, so important. Here in the New York area, we have it's a business shutdown, only essential businesses, but restaurants are able to do takeout. You can't, all the chairs have been put away, but you can still do takeout. Now, some restaurants are doing it, some aren't. There's questions about what stores. There's a hardware store down the street from us that's open. How can companies that may be in business today, some are doing phone orders only, if they're in merchandise, should companies communicate to their customers during this unprecedented crisis period?
That's a good question. And what we're telling clients is that, in a sense, this is a crisis PR moment. They need to have a plan in place. They need to determine who their spokesperson is and point people to that spokesperson, both in terms of internal messaging to their existing audiences as well as externally to the press, and have a schedule of generally when we want to put out messages, and make sure they put those messages in any place that their customer base and their network of followers will look. So that includes obviously Facebook for a more consumer-based audience, LinkedIn for a more business-to-business audience. Twitter crosses a lot of different landscapes, but tends to be for techies and for business-to-business. Instagram, we are looking at even things like, how clear are you on your telephone answering message? How good is your signage in store to lead people to the conclusions that they need to know about your business? Are you sending out an e-newsletter on a regular basis? And part of the challenge of this pandemic is, there's no set timeline. We don't know when. So I'm in, America's hometown, Plymouth. Our governor's talking about we should peak somewhere around mid-April, and we're hoping that it will subside around May 1st. There's no guarantees there, but So it's an organic situation, and even the timeline you set up, you need to be somewhat flexible about. So today, our governor put out a message that he's really asking us to shelter in place through May 4th. He also noted that he's expanded the list of some of the quote essential services. So that's been expanded to chiropractic. The marijuana industry is battling for their consumer shops to be open. Right now, it's only medicinal. So every industry has their own challenges, and some of the messaging is related to what's going on legislatively, and from state and local advisors, and how do you react to that, and how do you make sure that you keep your audiences calm and well informed.
Well, keeping your audience well informed is so important. When you talk about somewhat larger businesses that may have a regional audience beyond a single location organizations, what have been some of the important messaging that larger companies need to do as we kind of go through this period where there was kind of the initial shock of what was happening, and then the changes that needed to be made, events canceled, moving to home offices. But now we're getting into a new normal where we're into the second week, at least for us, working from home. So it's sort of like a new normal has kind of happened. How do you advise to your larger clients what their messaging should be and how it should evolve?
Well, so there needs to be consistency, both in terms of the message itself and the delivery of the message. And so you need top executives to committee on these things and make sure that you have a message that is both honest, concise, and direct. I think where some of the messaging gets lost that I feel I've got COVID-19 overload on is all the messaging that gives me too much information about the pandemic and not enough about the business. We already know the links to the CDC and the state health board and the local health board and some of the science behind this. What I really need to know is, how is this impacting me as the customer? What does that mean to me as your hours and your availability? So as a good example, we were approached by even a local dentist who is under the auspices of operating or managing and accepting only emergency cases. But there's no real definition to what emergency is. And so we worked with that dentist to determine that if you're in pain, if you have an embarrassing front tooth situation that just looks ridiculous, if you have gum swelling, if you have issues that need to be addressed, decay that is starting to bother you, that's an emergency. Otherwise, the customer doesn't really know what that emergency is. So we had to put out, and we continue to put out, ongoing communication about what are emergencies, how can they set up individual appointments, how do we make sure that they are safe on those appointments by staggering appointments so that people don't bump into each other in the reception area, those kinds of things. Another example is we were approached by an overnight camp in Maine that is concerned about will we have a camping season, and how do we communicate that to the camping families, our staff, and the people who provide us with supplies. How do we continue to talk to them when we don't know what the timeline is or what the ultimate resolution will be?
There's so much uncertainty now about when events will happen. So many events from the spring are trying to be rescheduled for the late summer and fall. Now, Steve, one of the questions that we've been working on is helping customers and clients with their home offices. There's kind of a technical aspect to it, having the laptops and the internet capability, the router and such, to be effective working at home, especially if you have more than one person trying to use the Wi-Fi for significant equipment at a time. And then just sort of the ergonomics of, I went out and bought my wife a new desk and chair to use in our living room, which she's quite happy about, and made her work at home a lot easier. What are some of the advice you have for people who are faced with working at home now when they might not have done it before?
Well, so in particular, we're addressing with clients how to communicate using Zoom or WebEx or GoToMeeting or any of the other many platforms that are available for video virtual meetings. But the key, and we're doing a lot of podcasting now, so not dissimilar to what we're doing right now. It allows them to control their message. It allows them to put their message in many channels where it is seen, and it allows for a powerful interpersonal communication that only video helps reproduce. But given that, we talk to people about there are some real keys to Zoom. One is good lighting so we can see you. Two is your background distracting or reasonable? Are you close enough to the camera where we can actually see your head? Have you isolated yourself in a private space so that we're not interrupted by your dog, your children, your ex-lover, whatever might be running through your environment? And we also, you can see I'm wearing a headset partially because I have an office that could echo if my voice was if we're just bouncing off the laptop microphone. So there are a number of things to look at from the standpoint of doing a virtual meeting or a podcast that we try to run through that checklist so that that communication is informative and straightforward as opposed to distracting and chaotic.
Well, it's certainly a lot to it. I found lighting is very important, and as you said, using a microphone can help, or some type of a headset. Still working on my background. It's my bookshelf is still not quite fully organized, so it'll take some time.
Little secret tip for you is in some cases people are just draping a white bed sheet behind them that becomes essentially a green screen, or Zoom itself allows you to filter in some exotic backgrounds from tropical scenes to an office building to the front steps of the White House.
Well, we'll work on that. But Steve Dubin, why don't you just take us through in closing? Tell us a little bit about your public relations and advertising practice based in Plymouth, Massachusetts.
Yeah, thank you. So if we can help you out there with your messaging, both for this crisis or ongoing, more positive opportunities that keep you in the news and keep you top of mind, go to our website, PRWorkZone.com. And we tend to work with mid-sized companies that are large enough where they understand they need to compete for marketing, but they are not large enough to have an in-house staff. They need to have somebody involved who can make good suggestions and drive the bus on a monthly basis. Those are the people we serve. Typically, they're from 1 to 50 million in gross, with a focus on companies that have unusual stories to tell that they're not quite sure how to get their arms around it. Like a good example, that would be New England Burial at Sea is a client of ours, or Boot Camp for New Dads is a client of ours.
Okay.
As well as senior healthcare, we do a lot of work with. Do a lot of work with green environmental clients and business-to-business type clients.
Well, certainly, as you mentioned, helping so many of us learn how to use some of the new software solutions. I have to admit, I just learned to get comfortable with Zoom last week, and now it seems like it's a great communications tool where I think I'm going to do 3 conferences like this today. But you know, you're a great asset to your clients up there in the Boston area. I just want to thank you for your time today and sharing your expertise with our CBSI Talking Business audience. Steve Dubin, thank you.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Our pleasure. We'll do it again soon, and best wishes to you, and stay well. From my home office in White Plains, New York, for Harrison, New York-based CBSI Services provides credit card enhancement benefit programs to over 1,000 banks around the country in customer service management. Great to talk with you today. This is Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Services. Have a great day and stay well, everybody.